Hello and welcome back. So last video I took you on a deeper dive into early season team trends and what those could mean for your fantasy team, especially your goaltending. But today we're going to look at player trends and specifically goal scoring trends. So goal scoring was up from 5.9 to 6.3 goals per game last year, and through this point in the 22-23 season, goal scoring is back up to 6.3 again. So how do we take advantage of this in fantasy? So what we'll be looking at today will help you evaluate potential waiver options, guys that you can pick off the waiver wire before they take off. It'll also help you with evaluating guys on your roster currently and whether to drop them or give them some more time. And this analysis will also help you evaluate potential trade options so you can take advantage of the data to get out in front of hot streaks or cold streaks. But how can we tell when a player's hot start is sustainable? How can we tell when they're about to break out? Well, it's not an exact science, but the best tools that I've found are relatively simple ones. So we're going to be looking at goals above expected, goals totals, and shooting percentage. So let's take a closer look. Now this is a visualization I've done of Moneypuck's goals above expected, and for those of you new to advanced stats, this is a metric that takes into account the probability a shot has of becoming a goal based on factors like distance from the net, angle of the shot, type of the shot, and what happened before the shot. Essentially, an expected goal is what a player should have given the quality of their shots and chances. And what you see here is a list of players who are exceeding what the model expects them to have at this point in the season. So the top of the list is a guy I talked about on the channel before the season, and that is Erik Karlsson. Karlsson was featured in the 2 Elite Defensemen video mainly because he met the criteria of above 0.5 points per game, top 10% in shots and power play points per game, and he had done that 2 of the last 5 seasons, albeit in 17-18 and 18-19. What caught my eye in the offseason was his goal per game number last year at 0.2. Now, Karlsson only played 50 games, but in an 82-game season, that would put him on pace for 16 goals, which would have ranked him tied for 5th in the league amongst defensemen. So that plus the departure of Brent Burns and the prospect of more ice time, both even strength and on the power play, made him an interesting fantasy option this year, and you could have had him at value at 140 ADP in the 12th round, which sounds like incredible value right now. Now this year, Karlsson's found his previous Norris Trophy form, at least offensively. 12 games, 9 goals, 6 assists, 15 points, 5 on the power play, 32 shots, and 3 game winners. On a per game basis, 0.75 goals per game. Right off the bat, that seems unsustainable. So Cale Makar had 28 goals last year, and his goal per game was a 0.36. So either Karlsson's about to score 61 goals this year, or he definitely will regress from that number. Now, this elevated goal per game number is partially a result of sample size, only 12 games, but there's obvious room for regression there. The other per game areas are actually very sustainable for Karlsson. He's been above 0.5 assists per game every year of the last 5 except for 1. His 0.41 power play points per game is very strong, but only slightly above his 5-year high. And his shot per game number is the highest it's been in a while, but even with regression baked in, it would still likely be in the top 10th percentile. So the case for regression is in the goal department, and Moneypuck has him at 1.66 expected goals, and he's currently 7.34 above that, and his shooting percentage is 28%. His career average is 5.9, and his average during his prime was around 7 to 8%. So expect regression to the mean on his shooting percentage, and don't expect the goals to continue at this pace. But even if he slows down the goal scoring, his power play, shot volume, and assist numbers should stay relatively close to where they are now, and he therefore stays fantasy relevant. The only other thing to discuss with Karlsson is injury risk, and he hasn't played more than 56 games any of the last 4 seasons, though he did play 50 of 56 in the shortened season. And if you're uncomfortable with that injury risk, now would be a great time to sell high on Erik Karlsson and maybe try to pick up Charlie McAvoy before he comes back on IR or off of IR, and then Aaron Ekblad, same type of phenomenon. You could potentially try to push that value forward into a more consistent player on a better team. But if you can stomach that injury risk, and or if a trade like that won't work, I do believe Karlsson can hold up much of this production, even if it's not quite at the blistering pace he started at, and even though he's probably not going to continue at this goal pace. Now you see Connor McDavid right below Erik Karlsson with 6.15 goals above expected. He has 11 on the year, and his shooting percentage is 28.9%, which should indicate that he can't keep this up, as he's usually between 9 and 12% shooting. But if there's one player who could completely destroy analytics models and do whatever the hell he wants to do on the ice, it's Connor McDavid. And I was watching the TNT broadcast the other night. Wayne Gretzky thinks McDavid could score 60 this year, and it seems to be the similar logic that we used to apply to Sidney Crosby. So Crosby decided one year to be better on faceoffs, and he ended up top 10 in faceoffs. He decided one year to score more goals. He won the Rocket Richard, and this feels like the same type of thing with McDavid, and that's kind of what Gretzky was saying. So I wouldn't necessarily expect him to regress all that much, but you know, he is off to a really good start, to say the least. Now, what you see on the right is goal totals from top to bottom, and the color is the shooting percentage. So red is higher and blue is lower. And the brightest shade of red, or the deepest shade of red that you see there, is for Shane Pinto, and he's got 6 goals on the year, 2.36 expected, so 3.64 above expected, and his shooting percentage is 40%, which is highly unsustainable. So even if you believe he may get more opportunities with Josh Norris out of the lineup, he's not going to keep up this goal pace forever. Right now, he'd be a good daily stream. He'd probably be a decent weekly stream, but I'd monitor it week to week to make sure he's still producing. The next darkest red, also with 6 goals, is Jonathan Toews. And if you're in a face-off league, just keep him regardless of what this says. But if not, he's 3.09 above expected. His shooting percentage is 31.6%. And just for reference, it's usually between 9 and 14%. So he's more than double that right now. And he is due for regression as the sample size increases. Again, this is a goals metric, so other peripheral categories may still give him and other players on this list some value in terms of fantasy, but when it comes to goal production, there will likely be a regression from this pace. You also see Val Nichushkin up there, relatively high, 3.53 expected goals. He has 7 on the year in 7 games, and his shooting percentage is 26.9%. So high, but not completely insane. The key with Nichushkin is, since he came to Colorado, he's been within 1 goal of the expected goals model. So last year it predicted 24.6 and he ended up with 25. This year it's expecting him to have 3.53 by now. That's a 0.50 goal per game, which would put him at a 41 goal pace over an 82 game season, which is really good. But he's never played an 82 game season. So if he misses time like he usually does, he's probably going to end up around 35 goals this year, give or take. And many of those will come on the power play. So he may regress from that goal per game average that he's at now, but even still, he'll be a good goal scorer this year and probably still valuable for your fantasy team. And he is dual position eligible, so that is another thing to keep in mind. Now, Trevor Zegras is also on here, but I'd look at him to maybe sustain this. So last year he was expected to have 16.7 goals. He ended up with 23, so he exceeded that pretty well by about 5. This year, 1.7 expected. He's at 6 right now, so he's about on pace with his goals above expected last year. And if you watch him play, he generates chances and has a laser shot that's very accurate. His shooting percentage this year is high. It's 28.6%. Last year it was 12.7%, so maybe some regression there as more shot volume comes in, but still probably going to be around a 20 to 25 goal scorer at least. Now, as you look at this chart on the right, you can also notice goal scorers with the deepest blue, aka the lower shooting percentage, and that indicates that this pace may be sustainable. So you see Svechnikov, Kaprizov, Caulfield, Pasternak, Stamkos, Kempe, Tkachuk, and I quickly want to mention Tage Thompson. So Thompson is shooting at 15.4%, and he's expected to have 4.36 goals. He has 7 on the year, and this data was from before Tuesday night. So it shows 6, but he has 7 now. And he in relatively manageable goals above expected, and his relatively normal shooting percentage indicate that this can continue. So last year he was 11.9 goals above expected and ended up with 38 on the year. I don't necessarily anticipate that he exceeds expectations to that level this year, but he will likely exceed the model's expected goals, and he shoots a ton, which will keep his shooting percentage down and his goal count up. And shooting volume is good for your fantasy team, so he's averaging 3.5 to 4 shots per game minimum. He had 2 games, as I mentioned in the week 4 recap. He had 2 games last week where he put up 8 shots on goal. I didn't check the shot numbers from Monday night. Was it Monday night's game where he had the hat trick? But I'm sure he took a ton of shots in that game as well. So that's going to give you a nice floor to his file. And then one of the deepest blue guys on here that I haven't mentioned yet is Mika Zibanejad. 6.97 expected, 6 on the year, and he's shooting at 10.9%. So he's usually between 10 and 14% shooting. But in 2019, he hit 19% and put up 41 goals in 57 games, almost a 60-goal pace. So he has that ceiling, and I'd imagine he will not only continue scoring at these levels, but he could go through a hot stretch at some point where his shooting percentage climbs above 20% and the goals start pouring in. He also, he's a second half player, as we saw in the second half analysis video, so he could potentially be another buy target, but his value could probably not be much higher than it is right now. He's currently ranked 9th in Yahoo category leagues. But speaking of Rangers, let's take a look at the opposite metric, goals below expected. And what this data is showing us is that players who are generating chances and should be scoring, but just aren't getting the puck luck, and now might be a perfect buy low opportunity for some of these guys. So the guy leading the pack is Zibanejad's line mate and best friend, Chris Kreider. So Kreider has an expected 8.45 goals on the season, but he only has 4 thus far. And if you look at the numbers, there's more to it than that. So Kreider is shooting at 9.8%. Right now, about half of what he's done the last 2 years and well below his usual average. So if he regresses to the mean, that means more goals for sure. In addition to the shooting percentage, Kreider usually outpaces his expected goals between 1.5 and 3 and exceeded it 13.1 last year, which means that he's about 6 to 8 goals away from where he should be at this point in the year. The third factor is the Rangers are leading the league in shots on goal, but they're 4th worst in team shooting percentage. So it's not just Kreider who's snake bitten, it's the entire team. And on the next slide, you'll see a couple of Rangers on there. Now, Kreider typically outpaces his expected goals and puts up such a high shooting percentage because a lot of his goals are tip-ins and or rebounds, many of which don't count if he misses the net or hits the post, but they do count if he scores the goal. So he'll get the goal and the shot if he gets a tip in or a rebound. And that will bump your shooting percentage and your goal totals. And he's the best in the league in front of the net. So if you have Kreider, keep him and wait for him to return to form. It's not going to take that long. It's coming for sure. If you don't have him, now is an excellent chance to buy low on a guy that somebody in your league probably drafted in the 2nd or 3rd round, and they're probably unhappy with him. And if they're impatient, you can capitalize on it right now, and that may be a huge bump to your team because his shot volume currently ranks 15th in the league, and his power play production is just outside the top 25. He throws some hits as well, and he is dual position eligible. So that could be a good buy low or a trade target opportunity. Now, back at the data, this is probably a good time to mention if you want access to any of this data, it's available in the Patreon link in the description below. And if you join as a patron, you get these data visualizations earlier than when the videos come out. So my patrons have had this for the last day or two as I've been working on this video. So it can definitely give you that edge in your fantasy league if that's what you're looking for. But the next guy on this list is a very similar file to Kreider, and that is my boy, Kyle Connor. So I previously mentioned that I usually draft Connor every year around the 4th round range, and he's provided excellent value for me in the past. This year he was drafted ADP 28.6 in the 3rd round and hasn't gotten off to a good start. But let's take a deeper look into his file to find out why. So first off, every year Kyle Connor drastically outperforms his expected goals. So 11.9, 8.3, 6.1, 5.8, 7.1. But this year, he's drastically underperforming at a negative 4.1. Why? His shooting percentage is a dismal 3%, which is very uncharacteristic of him. He's usually a set-your-watch 15% shooter, and he's nowhere near that right now. This year is not likely going to be another one close to 50-goal season for Kyle Connor, given the start that he's had, but I can't imagine him keeping up this pace for that much longer. I'd say he's about to break out any minute, and if you can throw a low ball offer at whoever has him in your league, you could be making an incredible deal. He's still putting up shots, so he's averaging 3.6 shots per game, so you'll have a decent floor even if you have to wait a little bit for the goal scoring to follow. And with Winnipeg, it's just very difficult for me to understand what the hell's going on there. It seems to me like they kind of need a retool or a rebuild. I don't know if Kyle Connor's waiting for anything like that to happen. They just hired a new coach. Maybe he's adapting to the new system or whatever, but he's one of those guys, typically a mid-30s to close to 40 goal scorer. This was a shortened season, and he's nowhere near that pace right now, so I would definitely buy low on Kyle Connor. He's probably not there on your waiver wire. Back at the data, there's some other guys. Sam Reinhart shooting 0%. That's right, 0 goals thus far, but expected to have 3.51, so getting chances, just not finishing. Same thing with Sam Bennett, though he does have a goal. This could be indicative of a middling Panthers team going through a bit of a transition from the Huberdeau period. Now they're dealing with the Ekblad injury. They haven't had Anthony Duclair all year. But in the coming weeks, Ekblad will be back, and eventually they'll get healthy, and both Reinhart and Bennett will have more weapons to work with, especially on the power play. So don't give up on these guys altogether. If you don't have them, maybe monitor their progress over the next week or so and grab them off the wire or lowball someone with a trade offer. Remember, Sam Bennett does typically get shot and hit volume as well, and Sam Reinhart is, I believe, still center right wing eligible. Now, Trevor Moore is also very low. I think that's a product of his shot volume. So he's currently 21st in the league in shots with 39, but only a 2.6 shooting percentage. So he's a guy worth taking a flyer on. If the Kings have a 4-game week, he'll probably give you a decent floor with his shot volume, and the potential for goals is definitely there. As I've mentioned many times before, that line assignment is very nice, and LA does need to find the back of the net somehow. They haven't been doing it in years past, and this seems to be the type of year where they can potentially break out. Speaking of having breakout offensive years, Matt Barzal is not known to be a goal scorer, and he doesn't have a goal on the year, but he is generating a ton of offense. The Islanders are 4th in the league in goals. He has 10 assists in 10 games, 3 on the power play, and 27 shots, but no goals. So Barzal usually hits his expected goals right on the nose, and if you extrapolate his expected goals right now over the 82-game season, he should put up a career-high 23 goals this year. If he keeps up this assist pace, that plus the goal total would put him close to 100 points on the year, which would definitely catch your attention. Now, I'm not saying that's a sure thing. It's probably not going to happen, but I could definitely see a career year for Matt Barzal this year, or at least something close to that 85-point rookie season. Now, I'm not going to go over every name on here, but Luke Cunnin is a player I've mentioned in several weekly videos as a good waiver option, and to see that he's 2.85% goals below expected and his shooting percentage is 3.6%, that could mean he's still a very good waiver option, just without the name appeal, and he's not on a great team. So probably a daily stream for me in a 12-team league, maybe a weekly stream if you're in a deeper league. Now, all you Leaf fans out there, you could probably look at Austin Matthews on this list and panic a little bit, but he's shooting at 6.3%, which is at least 10% below what he usually puts up. The last few years, he's been plus 18.1, plus 11, plus 18.3 goals above expected. Right now, he's minus 2.7, so I'd assume he's about to go absolutely ballistic on the league. And then one other thing I wanted to mention, if you see Tavares on this list, minus 2.63, that was before his hat trick last night. So this was I obtained this data, I believe, Tuesday night before the game started. So that's when all this data is from, and a couple games have happened since then. And last night Tavares put up a hat trick. So currently he's expected 7.8 goals, and he's at 7. So he would not still be on this list, and that kind of it kind of shows you that this data is already kind of predicting things happening. They showed that he was a little bit below expected. He comes out with a 3-goal performance, and he's right back to the where he should be. Now, as we move to this graph, so what this graph shows you is goals above expected sorted by goals. So you'll see from top to bottom are the goals leaders, and the darker the red and to the right indicates the potential for regression. The darker blue and to the left indicates potential regression to the mean this way. That may mean a potential buy low opportunity. So we went over a lot of this before, but it's interesting to get a visual to kind of clearly identify guys who are actually getting it done with their play. Steven Stamkos is off to a great start. So 7 goals on the year, and he's actually below his expected goals. If you were just looking at his numbers and maybe thinking to yourself without looking at the data, you'd probably say, oh, he can't keep this up. But as I mentioned, he's below his expected goals, and his shooting percentage is right where it should be at 15.2%, which is a great sign for Stamkos owners. So Zibanejad, we just covered a bit. Zach Hyman may be a great little waiver option in shallow leagues. 6 goals, 6 assists, 3 power play points, 36 shots, and 12 hits. So about as good of a start as you could hope for from Hyman, especially when he's not getting all the PP1 time. But he's currently 89% owned, so he's probably not available in most leagues, but a good start nonetheless. Now, Ovi's definitely not available on your waiver wire, but he looks right on track this year. Anders Lee is scoring goals and averaging a point per game through 10 games. He's on pace for 41 goals, and the expected goals and shooting percentage at 17% tells us that this is actually possible. So he could potentially keep this up, and he's only 55% owned, but a single position left wing. So the only thing hurting him is that. Lee is also averaging 3 shots per game, 1.8 hits per game, and a 0.3 power play point per game average. So he's definitely fantasy valuable for more than one thing, but the goals are there, and he's currently slightly below his expected. So this is pretty much where he should be right now. And the last guy I wanted to mention on this list is Jaden Schwartz. So 5 goals on the year, but 6.1 expected. Pretty normal shooting percentage, 14.7%. 10 points in 11 games, 34 shots, 4 power play points, 4 primary assists as well, so generating on top of that. He's only 34% owned, and I've mentioned him in the Week 4 video. I'm giving him another bump here. He's definitely getting it done, and he's probably available for your league. So if he is, you should probably go out there and grab him. Now, scrolling down, Matt Tkachuk, a little below expected, even though he has 5 goals and 13 points in 10 games. Shooting percentage at 10%, which is normal for him, but last year, 16.6%. So he could stay at this pace, or he could get a slight bump in shooting percentage. Either way, he's on pace for 41 goals this year, and I'd put him in that 37 to 43 goal range based on this data. Excellent start to his Panthers tenure, and hopefully I didn't just jinx it, but I was not on board with him at the beginning of the year, and I'm currently eating crow on that one because he's playing really well to start the season, despite some of the early season struggles for the team as a whole. Now, Brian Rust is pretty close to expected. We covered Chris Kreider, but Jack Hughes is another guy to watch out for. Only 9.1% shooting, 5.42 expected goals, but tons of shot volume, which may explain the dip in shooting percentage. So 44 shots this year. That's 4.4 per game, which is 11th in the league. And that kind of caught my attention because most years that would be top 5. But this year, Pasternak averaging 5.7, Timo Meier 5.25. A bunch of guys are tied with 5 shots per game, and then Hughes is a little bit below that. But Hughes is a point per game right now, 10 points in 10 games, and it seems like there is some upside in terms of the goal production. The only thing he does need to work on is faceoffs. He's at 35% on the dot, so that's not going to cut it for faceoff leagues. Now, on the last page, we'll see Max Domi due for a little regression, 28.6% shooting, but getting a great opportunity in Chicago. With that much ice time, even strength, but especially on the power play, that's another factor to keep in mind. Guys like Domi, Gostisbehere, Brett Ritchie, these are the power play options on bad teams, and they will get more opportunities if they're exceeding their expected goals. They could be streaming options for daily or weekly needs, but I wouldn't necessarily own them year-round. As you can see here, they're probably due for a little bit of a regression. Travis Konechny, he's been hot as well. So 4 goals, 7 assists, 11 points in 10 games, and his shooting percentage is reasonable at 13.3%. It's likely a result of his 3.3 shots per game and getting a great opportunity on PP1 and in the top 6 for the Flyers. So he's a guy that should be looked at on your waiver wire. Another one of those guys, they're not necessarily a bad team anymore. They're actually playing very well. But, the beginning of the season, you would have thought of him as a good player on a bad team, but they're actually coming through. So that's why you take a shot on some of those guys. I took a shot on Keller. In hindsight, Konechny would have been better, but you live and learn, and you kind of dump those guys to the wire and figure things out, and that's why we look at the data. On the opposite side, Bergeron, Johansson, Aho, all pretty close to expected. Zach Parise could be scoring a little bit more, especially considering his net front work on PP2. And another guy I mentioned in the preseason, Andrei Kuzmenko, was my top rookie target this year, mainly for his PP1 assignment and the fact that he was an older rookie coming over from the KHL. This year, 3 goals, 3 assists, 6 points in 10 games, 3 power play points, 2 power play goals, 29 shots, 2.9 shots per game. Moneypuck's expected goals model had him at 5 goals. He's currently 2 below that, so there is room for him to improve. But it's understandable that coming to a new team and a new league that there would be some growing pains, and the fact that he's been somewhat productive through all of those growing pains is hopeful. Now, there's a lot more we could look at in terms of buy low and sell high candidates. This was mainly goal data, but we'll leave it here for this video. If you like this content, let me know in the comments below. Maybe I'll add a part 2 with different metrics and visualizations. But either way, if you made it through to the end of this video, I want to thank you for sticking with it, and I will see you in the next one.